Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you to the 6th edition of the CMS die ZEIT conference in Davos. It's almost a tradition now, and thank you to all of you for being here. I would also address many thanks to Rainer Esser, CEO of die ZEIT, to him and his team for the excellent work and for making this at all possible for us. Rainer, it is a pleasure and it is an honor to work with you on this project with a person of your quality and a company of that prestige. Thank you very much. So about the theme, challenges and opportunities in the world of tomorrow. That is a vast, very interesting subject, of course, very broad. It is high on the list of discussions here in Davos at the WEF, and actually the Global Risk Report for 2020 has been released very recently, and it contains an impressive list of risks: extreme weather, climate action failure, natural disasters, biodiversity loss, human-made environmental disasters, data fraud and theft, cyber attacks, water crisis, global governance failure, and asset bubble. And as you can hear, climate and environmental risks are obviously dominating, and as we all know, we can observe in today's world a lot of casualties on businesses and individuals caused by extreme weather conditions. And all of that in a context also of growing demography in many places of the world. And this growing demography in itself puts an additional pressure on resources, on the production of energy, on agriculture, food, healthcare, infrastructures, waste management, and on and on. And this is the world we're living in, and to that we have to add everything that's going on in the field of technology and science in general. And technology carries very nice opportunities, definitely is one of the keys for fixing some of our problems, but it also bears the challenges of its own, such as cyber security, but not only. Individuals, but especially businesses, have to adapt, have to innovate almost in real time or die. Also, workforces are at stress because some of the workforces are replaced by artificial intelligence or robotics and the like. And new jobs must be created. There are fantastic opportunities, but those new jobs require new skills, and those new skills require new resources in education. So yet another challenge. What can we expect and what must we do? From the top down, from governments or other public bodies. They start in some countries to tackle the issue really seriously, but still governments are faced with short-term objectives of the requests from their people to get a better purchasing power, to get more health care, less taxes, more comfort, more leisure, and also the same people want more care for the environment, which is to some extent a bit in contradiction. So governments have to face short-term objectives And they are struggling with issues such as the debt that very much serves the financing of expenses rather than investments. And so it is difficult for governments to look at a long-term sustainability program. And so what can we expect from businesses? Probably a lot, because businesses are pointed at as being part of the cause of some of our problems. But definitely, businesses are probably the key, and they have the answers and the ability to fix these issues. And I believe it will be very interesting to hear from world-class business leaders from Allianz, from Bayer, from Palantir, to what their vision on these various aspects actually are. More modestly, as CMS, as a global law firm, has also its commitments and its obligations. We aim at serving our clients, helping them make decisions in an increasingly complex environment, legal environment, especially internationally. And we are committed to understand the business of our clients. We are committed to partner with them and together with them, not only to face the future, but to shape it. And then there is, I think, also a very important role that needs to be played by quality media, such as the ZEIT. Social networks are great. They provide and produce very positive things, but not only. There are also negative aspects. And for instance, some progress, scientific progresses, are sometimes bashed by groups in social networks, distorting information to the public, to the people, and sometimes preventing the use of technologies, or trying to prevent the use of technologies that actually could help solve some of the issues. So it is important. The role of the media is really important. Is it said and written enough that globally humanity has never been in a better shape than it is today? Of course, there are people here and there in regions of the world struggling, suffering, dying. But globally, the situation has never been as good as it is today in terms of life expectation, healthcare, mortality, etc., to name only a few of these issues. And also saying that businesses are in the center of the future fixing of some of the issues. Over history, we have seen that a nation with a good economy, with a booming economy, is usually a happy nation. And what does it take, actually? What values does it take to have a sound economy? It takes bold, entrepreneurial and pioneering spirit. It takes hard work, but it also takes optimism. And I think that altogether we have a duty to convey optimism and energy, especially to the younger generations on this planet. Because with all the news they have, if we only convey pessimism, we won't make progress. So I think it's a joint responsibility to build trust and optimism for the future, and apocalypse is not now, and it is not anytime soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, you've immediately noticed that this dashing gentleman, he is a real cosmopolitan through and through. In the international world of legal text, when it comes to great legal transaction, this gentleman is kind of James Bond. James Bond in solving most intricate international legal tax issues for his transnational clients. He served for CMS, the most prestigious law firm, for 35 years, CMS having 8,000 employees in 40 countries and 73 offices. Last year, they even opened an office in Nairobi and in Joburg, South Africa, so they are globally connected and can provide global solutions for their big clients. I'm very delighted that you are here. Merci mille fois, cher Pierre-Sebastien. You all look so well dressed, and you look full of spirit and full of vigor, and you all look forward to an interesting reception with illustrious guests. Our first guest is a lady, a super lady, Laura Rudas. She was elected to Austrian National Council at the early age of 26. Then she became Federal Executive Director and then youngest ever Secretary General, where she served for 5 years. Then she attended a seminar at Stanford University, and she decided to stay there and to join the coolest, the most mysterious, the most secret startup in Silicon Valley. The name of this company, the origin is from Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. And the most famous data program is called Gotham. You all know Gotham City, the hometown of Batman. And there she is Chief Strategy Officer right now at Palantir, and there she makes science fiction become reality. Jochen Wegner is Editor-in-Chief of ZEIT Online, and in talking with Jochen, Laura will for the first time unveil to this exclusive group of people here all the secrecies and all the mysteries of Palantir, and in particular which and she will disclose just to us which secret services around the world work with Gotham. And if Jochen does a really good job, she will also share with us her weak points, her weak moments when she's sitting there in the Californian diaspora. Dearly misses the Austrian dumpling soup, Mozartkugeln, balls in Vienna, Kaiserschmarrn. And after the session with Jochen and Laura, there will be a pause, and then please come back. It will be as dramatic as with Laura. Then Werner Baumann and Oliver Bäte, two really heavyweights of the economy worldwide, will then talk with Uwe Heuser. 3 alpha tiers. You should be here then. And now, welcome to Laura and Jochen.
Why did I actually accept that?
I don't know. Sorry. So, reveal everything now.
Okay.
This is, as Rainer mentioned, Laura. She's Executive Vice President, Strategy at Palantir. She used to be a really famous Austrian politician 5 years ago, and she basically totally disappeared for 5 years. She's almost never on stage, I think 2 or 3 times in all these 5 years.
Yeah, and look
so
what
we
happens
feel really honored. She just can't talk because Palantir is a really interesting company. It's one of the most expensive unicorns we have on this planet, with a valuation between 20 and 40 million. And it's not profitable by a billion. Did I say million? Sorry. Billion. It's funded by Peter Thill and Alex Karp, who's running around downstairs in the pavilion of Palantir, who almost never talked in the last years. Early investor InQtel, of CIA's investment arm, and they are doing, and you will explain it later, big data analytics, like developing software that helps find patterns in huge amounts of data. You track down bin Laden, but you can't confirm that. Today you claim, so Alex Karp claims you are preventing a terror attack every week with your software all over the planet. You're also working with the German state, I learned. You help to verify that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. You help banks to detect fraud. You help Airbus to find failures in their supply chain. Actually, 80% of your business is private. It's not public sector. And Palantir is one of the most discreet and secretive companies in the world. So, and you used to be in Austrian politics. So the first thing you wrote an essay about this in Handelsblatt just recently. How was it to go from a socialist Austrian politician to becoming a Silicon Valley entrepreneur? So how do you look at this world with your Austrian eyes?
Yeah, so so I actually, when I resigned from politics, after 10 years, I thought, I had a desire after more pragmatism, right? And I thought that I would find that at the West Coast, but I had no clue what actually shall I do after politics. So I did this sabbatical at Stanford, a one-year program, and I was scared off by the West Coast mentality of we find new business models and disrupt existing ones, and the arrogance, right? And then I was in a lucky situation to meet for the Bay Area very exotic company with a even more exotic founder and CEO, Alex Karp and Palantir.
He's a former neo-Marxist, to be precise,
we
and
are fighting
socialist.
About
and he has a
these terms,
PhD with Habermas.
Look,
so
he did his PhD at Frankfurt School. He was a student of Habermas, and he did the PhD in German, right? You see how I struggle with speaking English. He did his PhD in German, so it's you can see it's a different kind of the usual Silicon Valley person. He's different, but that Mendel somehow through the whole company, so they do not feel that they should disrupt industries, but they want to transform it. They are a little bit bridging the worlds between software, but also traditional old industry and companies. They embrace inhomogeneity and bipolarity, and so I feel it's good to be a little between the worlds, and so I managed to have best out of both worlds. So I'm in Silicon Valley, but also half of the time in Europe, because that's a strong market of ours.
We will talk about the ethics of your business soon, but can you describe in 5 sentences what you are actually doing at Palantir?
No, I'm joking.
So, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Sorry, Rainer.
So let me start with what we are not doing, okay? So we do not bring data, we do not have data, we do not take data. We are not even a data company. We're actually a software company that helps organizations and institutions to understand their data better, to drive better decisions. So we're kind of data logistic platform in highly regulated and complex environments. So institutions and organizations rarely succeed in making most out of the data. Why? Because it's unstructured and through scale also unmanageable. And so we build, we bring them together in a united platform, accessible for authorized subject matter experts. And easy, when you understand your data better, you make better decisions, you have better outcomes. So if you if you increase production, you produce more cars. If you are more efficient in supply chain, then you save money. If you understand customer markets better, you sell more, and so on and so on. So we help organizations and institutions to understand their own already accessible data better. And why does it? We will come to that, but
But you do
Is
not
it understandable? Because it's not easy
totally.
to understand. Okay.
So you do not collect data yourself. You
Exactly.
only work for companies who have data.
Exactly, and the data stays where they are, and we help institutions and organizations that they use their data more efficient and make more out of their data landscape. But we are not bringing in new data.
I was wondering if Donald Trump is here, and is your business becoming easier since he got elected, or more complicated? So you're working for all the three-letter agencies in the US, for example?
All over the world in Western democracies, not just in the US, also in Europe, and I think that also answers your questions.
You don't care.
We don't care. Like, we are a data operating system. It's like it's not on us to decide it's a good or it's a bad government. As you can imagine, I have an opinion.
What's your opinion?
But it's like, I'm still a social democrat, and I
so
support
you hate what you do.
We are an operating system, and I do think it's very important that Western democracies use their data better to become more efficient. And I think that's in a democracy key, that governments, no matter that governments that are elected are working efficiency. That's like it's a need.
But
so
the elected,
especially also in the security field, that make decision based on data.
The elected governments become more complicated, I have the feeling. So especially when you look at the US or other countries. So one example at least your business is watched more closely these days. So there are protests going on week after week for quite some time of students who protest at universities, do not go to Palantir, mainly because the US government is using your software to find the parents of children who immigrated to the US, and so that's huge coverage everywhere in investigative reports and stuff like that. And so there are protests in front of the Palantir headquarter and wherever. So
on micro, we are not working with this department, but I want to answer it macro because you are not an American journalist, so you will have a second and a third question, so I will answer it. Because what you are describing is, like, as I said, like, we are working with Western democracies all over the world, not just in the US, also in Europe, especially in the Nordics, and so on and so on. And we do that under the rules of law. Does it mean that everything that is like legal is also legitimate? No, and when we are aware that we have a very powerful tool, or we give our partners a very powerful tool in their hands, so it's important to assess every single case, and I can tell you, not just in the government field, also with our commercial customers. We are working very close with the subject matter experts with our customers, and we have a whole team. It's called privacy team. It's looking into case per case for the areas that are gray, right, where where it's legal allowed, but is it legitimate? Again, it's not just in the field of government, but also in the commercial sector.
Can you mention projects you declined to do?
So sometimes it's use cases with customers, many of them in the commercial sector, and it's not about declining, but it's finding. We are also declining. We declined to work for a tobacco company and so on, but it's like we very often say together with our customers also no to things where you are already able to, but you don't want to. Again, it's a we are aware that it's a very sensitive area, and I think there's no general answer, but you need to assess case per case, and you need to look at it very careful.
Yes, so Alex Karp said tech CEOs shouldn't be making politics or policy, which is in a way it's true, but if you're building tools that can be used in a good way or a bad way, and sometimes you just have to decide if you deliver weapons to special states or not, or it can be used
So
as
we
a weapon.
decided to work with Western democracies that are elected, and I do not think actually that it is on Palo Alto companies to decide and be more important than the society or the voters. But it is a clear decision that we work with Western democracies.
And how do you make sure, if your clients work with really private data, we come back later to that because there's a great example about cancer research, for example. How do you make sure that my private data, if it's aggregated in your database, is not used in the wrong way so that it stays private? I learned that much complexity of your business goes into thinking how you can make sure that these private data sets stay private, even when you look at broad data mountains all the time.
Exactly. Like from day one of founding the company and building the company and the product, or the two products, it was like a focus, like how can you support institutions to use their data more efficient, and at the same time saving individual freedom and privacy rights.
How does that work?
Like that's actually something that tech can solve, right? Like controlled access, transparency, and who is changing what information, who is seeing what information, and so on and so on. That's also key, and we will come later to it in the commercial sector when it's about like building these B2B platforms, right? Because when you want to have cross-industrial collaborations, you need to enable competing companies to collaborate in a controlled way. And here I think software can help.
Too
complicated. Okay.
Yeah. I want to share one fear with you I have. So I'm not a criminal, but I fear that at one point in time, I will show a data pattern that makes software like Palantir software, makes them think I'm doing something strangely. So you're looking always for similarities, very, very complex similarities, for example, and you track down people who are doing evil things. But you can also be tracked down just due to your data pattern. And then you have to prove that you just have a pattern and I did nothing wrong. So that's the new world we are going into now. And it's really complex to think about software and how you live in that world in the future.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about that? So you're producing that.
Look, it's not. I'm not saying it's a like that. It is not that it is an easy question. There is an easy answer. How? Like I do think that finding, like having all data, and like again, what we don't do, right? We don't bring new information. It's like all the information you already have. But nowadays you would spend like 80% of your time comparing the information, collecting the information, 20% with analyzing it. And I do think also in the security field, or especially also, that the human should spend 80% of analyzing information and not like collecting it and comparing it. But we are not inventing new rules. But again, with the software and the powerful tool, you will be able to do more and new things. And so, of course, we need to think about where to apply it and where not to apply it. So I'm not saying that's not an important question, but I just wanted to clarify that it's not. We are not bringing in a new rule what to compare. It's like a state is saying in the field of security this data is allowed to share. It's not. We are not bringing in a new law.
So we need new laws and new politics to deal with that. And do you have the feeling that politicians understand what's going on? As a politician,
like, do we all understand what's going on?
No,
it's
really,
like, I like. Look, it's not on me to give like political advice. I do think that we should talk about data differently, right? We are always talking about the risk of data, risk of data, but we are never talking about the risk of not using data.
Okay.
The risk of not using data when it's about cancer research.
Let's talk about cancer research.
Or let me like. So I. Again, yeah.
No,
you're the moderator.
Sorry.
No. You're right.
So just because you're mentioning cancer research, there was an interview in Handelsblatt some days ago with Merck CEO who famously mentioned Palantir because you have a joint venture with Merck and you try to build he said, you're building a Spotify for cancer research. What are you doing there? What? So
the reason why we actually never talk is because our customers are much better in it. So I will leave most of the explanation to Merck. So we try to bring all stakeholders in cancer research together and let them collaborate so that they improve the R&D to cancer research faster. So institutions, scientists, researcher, and so on. And like you mentioned Merck and Stefan Oschmann, who also talked about like the importance of collaboration and cross-industrial collaboration and institutions and organizations that maybe usually or sometimes even compete with each other need to collaborate in a very controlled way in certain fields. And we see that in aviation, when you look at Airbus, we see that in healthcare with Merck, we see that in mobility, and like there's almost no industry where not like companies and institutions collaborate with each other.
Okay, just to get the record straight, when will you go public?
Like an advantage that I have compared to Mr. Baumann, I'm not the CEO, so I do not need to answer that question.
Rainer, I'm so sorry.
No, you need to ask Harp and then tell me, please.
So what's the problem about going public these days? So you can't talk about this.
No, I can't. I
There
told
are
you, I
rumors
can't.
for
I can't.
years
I
now,
know.
so okay.
But the truth is that we are not so focused on that. We are focused on like building this B2, being the operator, powering more and more B2B platforms, improving our product, make it like the hurdle to use it, because like most of the users are non-engineers, are subject matter experts. We try to make them better in what they are already good in. So we take 80% of the company are engineers there, and we are not focused on that question.
Before we come to an end, I have to ask you about your essay again. You just recently wrote about, hey, Europe is not so bad. So all the Europe bashing and the industry is just stupid and it's not Silicon Valley and stuff. American CEOs could learn a lot from European companies. Oh, yeah. What exactly? So, like
like my feeling is that the last decade, Europe was like dominated by fear, right? Like we were, and I can say we were afraid of like AI, China, Valley, data, whatever. And now there comes like a new epoch where it's like where you can feel more confidence and willingness to shape. And I think that's important because like Europe has everything you need, right? Like they have trust, they have know-how that they generated, they have subject matter expertise, and of course, like they have an unbelievable amount of data and substance data. And when we agree that the next epoch will not be about like B2C platforms, but around B2B platforms, I do think that's actually like a play field where Europe can and should win. And my experience talking to executives in Europe is, and you mentioned Merck before, and like you can see that there is a new confidence, and I think that's the confidence that Europe needs. And coupled with like subject matter expertise, data, and trust that they have.
Do you have the feeling that, so you describe Europe as the third way between somewhere, you said China with its imperialism and the US with their disruptive culture, and there's this third European way. Maybe it's democracy and multilateralism and social democrats and stuff like that. So do you have the feeling that, our system is able to solve the large problems of the planet?
I think especially.
Like climate. We didn't talk about climate for at least 20 minutes now. So
but I know you're speaking after me, so it's like I will.
Oh, yeah, the people don't. I don't.
The real expert is speaking after me.
The audience doesn't know.
No, but it's so I think yes, absolutely, because one thing is like finding the algorithm that suggests you the movie you should watch when you sit on the couch. Okay, that went to Silicon Valley. But like innovating research when it's about cancer or other diseases, that's a very complex field and think, and you need to, like there are much more stakeholders involved. And doing that by protecting privacy and personal freedom, that's like, I couldn't imagine who else than Europe should win that and be able to do that.
Okay. Before we come to an end, and we have a surprise guest for another 5 minutes, if you allow me to ask a very special person some questions who we learned will be here today. Can you comment on the Austrian politics? So what's your feeling about Austria these days? Just one or two.
Yeah.
So you're happy with this situation?
I think both of Sebastian Kurz and I think like we proved the world that it's like, while many countries have like this, I don't know, like maximum age for becoming politician, we have a minimum age in Austria. No, serious. Like when I resigned 7 years ago, I promised myself that I will never comment on Austrian politics. Then I managed to find this secretive company and almost anyway never speak. I break it now, but not when it's about commenting Austrian politics.
Okay. So thank you very much for being on stage for the third time in the last 5 years. We didn't talk about climate for 20 minutes, and if you allow me to invite a special guest on stage, she's something like the thank you. Yes, thank you. So it's really improvised because we learned she will be here. So Luisa Neubauer, who is something like the German Greta, is in the audience. And I asked her before it would be possible to ask some spontaneous questions. So please welcome Luisa Neubauer. Thank you. Hi. She's a German activist in the Fridays for Future movement, and you see her all the time with Greta, who's also around. I think it's your first time in Davos.
Yes. Yes. Is it on? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't plan to come here, but then things changed. Now I'm here.
It's changed plans.
Yeah.
And you should have met a very important future head of state in this very minute, but the appointment didn't work. So it's great that you're here. So Luisa just very smartly declined an offer to join the supervisory board of Siemens Energy, as you may remember. So, which Joe Kaeser, who talked here 2 years ago, offered her. So my most important question. So you were in the Trump audience yesterday. I saw you there. Do you have the feeling that the people meeting in Davos, it's not about Trump only, but do you have the people you meet, are they really serious about climate change? It's doing something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No.
So they, wow. Okay. That's a big question. So what we hear a lot is people who walk around here, they walk down the streets and they say, well done you, everyone is talking about the climate. You're so successful. And now even Siemens is talking about inviting people like me to join their board. And that's nice, of course, but it kind of misinterprets our goals. Did we go on the streets to change discourse? No. Did we go on the streets to actually change the way we deal with the world? Yes, and that's not happening. So it's nice that we see discourse change, of course, and you could obviously see it as a first step, but it's nothing more than that, really, and it's not the reason why we're doing all that we're doing. So what we're seeing here, and that's really interesting, is that suddenly many people, not all of them obviously because we all saw Trump, feel obliged almost to talk about the climate and to confirm that they really, believe in it, which is kind of sweet actually, because it's like, well done you. And then they say they believe in the climate change, and then they say they're really committed to Paris. And we see there is more of a sense that it's a standard now to appreciate the work the climate activists do, and so on and so on. Does that help? Not yet. Do I think it's authentic? I think that's not to me to judge. Because what I hear is people now being in the spot that they feel like they have to point out their efforts in the climate crisis. And you know what? no matter if it's something they do for publicity or for a nice sustainability report or just because I felt it was no convenient time to mention that, what we can do is we can take that as seriously as it gets and then expect actions. And I think that is the point where we're at now. Because in times where everything you say and you do gets reported, it allows us to come back to that. And this is, for instance, what we did with the Siemens case. It would have been difficult to ask Siemens to stop investing or to stop collaborating in the Adani mine in Australia if Siemens wouldn't in the first place have claimed they want to be climate neutral and they love Paris and everything. But once they did it, we were the ones who could come up and be like, by the way, this doesn't add up. You can't claim to be climate champion and then invest in a coal mine that, plans to get coal from the ground for another 60 years. That's math. It doesn't work that way. And I think this is really what we can get out of the Davos Forum. Other than that, it's a lot of very nice words which still have to prove that there's anything more to that.
So you have obviously a sense of urgency. So some companies are changing. Goldman Sachs is changing, and BlackRock is changing, and whatever. They really think hard about this, but it's not going fast enough. And so I ask the question again. So do we have, so all this multilateralism, which is the Davos thing, talking about things, finding compromises, is that the best system to solve all these problems? Is that a strange question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a bit strange.
Okay.
But
why?
Well, obviously the climate crisis is a global crisis. It's a new crisis. It's a quality we've never seen before in any crisis before. Obviously, with a crisis that crosses borders, scientifically spoken, you need people to work together. So that's the only way we got. And obviously it doesn't work when you kind of crawl together in your own country and then say you want to protect it while actually you're, being part of this whole machinery that is fueling the crisis. It doesn't work that way. So yes, we do need very smart collaboration. We need very smart solidarity even, because it's right now in a time also when some countries are more asked to act than others, just because we share a burden but we have different resources. I find that obvious. But here in Davos, I think the interesting question that is being raised is what is the role of industries, of companies, of investors in this whole game that used to be just politically. And it is not, in fact, because here we have world economies meeting who are, most of them, part of the problem, if not even the problem, because it goes down to a fossil-fueled economy that is fueling this crisis, did a very good job for 150 years for humanity, building all the wealth we now, or many of us can enjoy, at least in this room, I guess. But now it turns out the rules have changed. And suddenly all those economies, fueling this crisis, are not just destroying the future of any economy, but destroying the future of my generation and of people all over the globe. So this is, I think, a question that's now on the table where, well, I think very few have found a solid answer yet. And it's nice that Larry Fink really thinks about it. And they're still the biggest investor in coal projects worldwide. So I think maybe thinking a bit harder would be nice. And then acting.
A personal question, last question. So it's not easy if you are, in a way, attacked by politicians and CEOs all the time. So even Donald Trump, in a way, in an abstract way, dissed you or your kind of people. And I know that there's a lot of hate on the net. How do you deal with that?
That's a very nice question of you to ask, because it seems sometimes that people tend to forget that we are all humans. And
you're humans.
Yes, and some of us actually had other things to do before we decided it was time to act on climate. If you may allow, I would say on that question, actually we're good, I'm well, Greta is well, we're taking care of ourselves. I think we are okay with that. But I would like to make a very short comment on the apocalyptic thing that Donald Trump raised, because it was mentioned here earlier before. Yeah. And I think it's It really worries me because we seem to be in a time where people who are scientists, who talk about the real danger of the climate crisis, who refer to reports from the World Economic Forum, who point out the biggest risks in the world are right now climate catastrophes, that those people who point that out are called apocalyptic. And it doesn't make sense. It seems so irrational. It is irrational. And I wished we found a more realistic way, a more rational way to deal with the crisis situation. And that is that we are on a point where irreversible chain reaction is starting already, where we're reaching crucial tipping points, and we cannot talk about any plans for the future without taking into account that significant amounts of our resources, human resources, but also natural resources, are destroyed to a level that human wealth on a completely new level is in danger. And I think this is, it drives me crazy hearing people like, not just Donald Trump, but it's really setting a discourse with that, pointing out that environmentalists and climate scientists and maybe even climate activists are doomers and apocalyptics and the ones who raise panic, while we need rationality to sink into a point that we agree at least on the fact that the risk has never been higher than today. The risk is as high as scientists say it has been when they were about to drop nuclear bombs. This is where we are. This is not being apocalyptic, but realistic. And now we need all those people with the very rational minds and all the facts and figures and economic feelings in their head to act on this accordingly. Not doing that, that's irrational.
Thank you very much. You have now the chance to talk to each other peacefully. Also to Lisa, for half an hour, exactly half an hour, please be back with us here on stage in half an hour. And then you'll see the CEO of Allianz, which will be really interesting, and Bayer, talking with Uwe Jean Heuser, the mastermind of economics journalism in Germany. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, please, concentration, dedication. Hello? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You're all back, and it's worthwhile that you're back, because now two heavyweights, two world champions are waiting for you. They both come from Rhineland. They both are fathers to families, and they both are CEOs of very big, very important international companies. Oliver Bäte, he thinks quick, he speaks quick, he runs quick, and he's very well known for his crystal clear approach to reform his big company, the Allianz, worldwide the biggest insurance company. And at the first annual meeting of Allianz, which he shared, he came in with red sneakers. And those of you who know Allianz, this is really a break with tradition. And the very last person at Allianz knew at this moment, now it's time for digital transformation. And they knew this is not a party, but this is a long-distance run. And when I look at you all, and I look at this very strong features of Oliver Bäte, and we all would go outside and doing some sport, he would be probably the most promising athlete among us. Last year was the most successful year of Allianz, and since he took the helm of Allianz, the wealth of the company increased, the stock value of the company increased by 31%. Werner Baumann is the mastermind of the most adventurous, most phenomenal acquisition in history. The purchase of the agrochemical company Monsanto. He's at Bayer for 30 years now. Since 10 years, for 10 years ago, he became CFO of the company. 4 years ago, he became CEO of Bayer. And you can well imagine that those last 4 years have been the most challenging in his career. The key word is glyphosate. Let's welcome, and the reception now is hosted by Uwe Heuser. He is at the helm of the economic desk of the ZEIT. Now let's welcome 3 Alpha Tiere.
Da ist es. Yeah? Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm here with 2 leading CEOs in the German corporate realm, Oliver Bäte, Werner Baumann, and we've decided to do this in English today, which gives me the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to call these 2 gentlemen by their first names.
You can say, yeah. You can say you to me.
I'm going to say you to you. So, Oliver, Werner, let's go. Werner, if I may start with you, a big company like yours, no, it's fine, you can come to us. A big company like yours has specific strengths and achievements. What especially could other companies learn from Bayer?
I think, quite frankly, the reason why I'm still very, let's say, with great enthusiasm with our company is that the one thing that stands out in our company is that people really like to work together. There's an extremely strong sense of belonging. And in particular, when the going gets tougher, and I guess you know what I'm talking about, our organization stands really together, which makes life easy in a way because you can focus your energy outward rather than inward. I think that's one of the really great things about the company. And then, of course, that constant push for the next better solution and that very strong innovation culture that we do have.
Oliver, people standing together in tough times, in windy times, and being loyal to the company, is that something that Allianz could learn from Bayer, that you would like to learn from Bayer?
It depends on who you speak. So Allianz has 3 core values, basically. One is about integrity. When you look at all the financial scandals, the tax scandals, Allianz was never on the first page, and I hope it stays this way. So that's something that we really cherish. The second one is competence. So when we find out that we are in stuff that we don't understand properly or not a leader, we get out of it and try to be best. And the third one, we're pretty resilient, right? We have had 3 financial crises the last decade. 2 of them put us pretty much to the edge, and we came back very strongly. So I think that formed the organization at large. What we have to accept is that Allianz is not a German insurance company with a few international subsidiaries. It is actually at home in 70 countries. We make a lot more money in other countries than we make at home, and people, even in Munich, have to understand the world is out there, it's not here. So that's, I think, what we'll have to learn.
So I take it you don't want to learn anything from Bayer. Is there something Bayer can learn from Allianz?
For sure, I like to have your stock performance. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to come. But no, we really admire the strength of leadership at Allianz. The fact that Allianz is a value-driven company and organization, and that it has been around forever, also as a actually very, very strong partner to our company, because we are doing quite a bit of business together. You're our most important insurer, and in times of difficulties, we know who we can rely on, and I think that is very, very important in business.
Yeah. I wish, by the way, we could support, it's another very important point, as in the past, German industry much more. Given our regulation, unfortunately, I could not invest as much as I would like to do into his stock. But that's not because we don't want, but because we can't. It's something we need to bear in mind. By the way, 2 comments. First on the intro. First one, 30% improvement in value was just last year. I've been there 5 years. Last year, the value increase was 30. And the other one, the problem was not the sneakers. The problem was that the sneakers were red because our company color is blue. So people were not forgiving me the red color.
Well, that makes sense. Your two companies, obviously very different entities, but if one looks at the two of you, there are also similarities. You both studied economics and business, even partly at the same university of Cologne. And you both, in your very own ways, not only CEOs of companies with 100,000 and more people, but trying to transform those companies pretty rapidly. The question I have is, maybe Werner, with you first, what is expected of a CEO with those goals and those tasks today? What's your role and how is it different from what it used to be maybe for your predecessors?
Well, I guess in each generation, regardless where you are in a big organization, actually I think also regardless of the level of the leadership position you have, challenges are different. And all of us, I guess you have done it at Allianz, we have done it at Bayer, have to figure out what is the right thing to do for the company. And once we came down on what it is that we want to do, it is important to create alignment for a decision to be taken, because your decision is worth nothing if you can't implement it. We did that, I think, with some success and some pieces we still have to show whether we are ultimately going to be successful. But in terms of leadership, it is very much bringing people together, not necessarily, at least as far as I'm concerned, kind of running ahead. I think it's much better to form consensus in a team before we go. And that has proven to be the right thing, at least for our company so far.
It's very similar. Running a very large organization is a little bit like riding an elephant, right? The elephant can decide to throw you off the back, right? So you need to be very careful in terms of how to think about making sure that it's not just alignment, but people are ready to really implement, as he said. And the problem is a lot of the incentives of people are not aligned with that. So we have a lot of questions around how do we simplify a business. That means a lot of jobs that actually manage complexity will disappear. So finding the right balance, we call it, between heritage and keeping the strongs of the past. Allianz will be 130 years old this year. And being strong enough and fast enough to renew is a real challenge. And the age structure in many of our large companies doesn't help. We have a lot of people that are above 45 and older that are very worried about the next 15 years of their career. Will they see it through to the end successfully? And we need to take these concerns very seriously. If I had to admit one thing as a mistake, initially I didn't take enough time to really not just explain, but actually bring the emotional buy-in to say, regardless of whether that is in your personal interest, we as a company need to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to be around another 130 years. And that is very important.
How honest can you be in these processes? Did you ever lie for your company?
Never. You?
Fortunately, my words are out in public.
Maybe not consciously, but to your point, I think it's a very, very dangerous and easy way to go first, to sugarcoat things and not be truthful and upfront. And similar to compromise, it will always come back and haunt you, always. And I think the better way to go for all people involved is to be straightforward. And what you said, I think, is also very important. Being straightforward does not mean that you cannot do it with respect, empathy, And certainly also with some people do it better than others, with maybe a human touch where you try to understand where your counterpart is at emotionally. Yeah, I've done it quite a bit, quite frankly, in very, very difficult situations. I used to be the labor director of our company, so the head of HR during the phase of the acquisition of sharing. And this is very, very difficult if you're sitting or standing in front of, let's say, 20 times this group of people, and you have to say that a lot of jobs are going to be lost because of something that is right for the company, but it feels awfully wrong for the individual. And I had a woman stand up who said, well, I'm 43 years of age, I'm a single mother, I have 3 kids, and I just bought an apartment. And you are telling me that I'm going to lose my job. Very, very difficult situation. Should have told her that she's not going to lose her job and ultimately she's going to lose it. Extremely difficult in terms of credibility. But helping people also in terms of, let's say, the financial means, requalification, helping people to get into new jobs is, I think, the best we can do. I think both of our companies are very, very socially responsible. And that is why right now, quite frankly, also in the current situation where we take roughly 10% of our global workforce out of active employment in the company, there's a lot of people who are personally affected, but they feel treated with respect, and I think that is, from a leadership perspective, the most important thing to do.
Oliver, do you remember a benevolent lie you might have told?
Hopefully not, because there are no benevolent lies.
All right, excellent.
Right. So what? And it's very important. It's very important. What obviously what you're trying to imply is their intent and non-intent, or do you complete? But it's very difficult to apply. Do you supply all the facts all the time to everybody, so that there's a difference between saying the truth but not the full story versus going out and saying, by the way, I just want to tell you we are going to do that. The other thing, and I want to pick up on what he said, I was also, this is what we have in common, we're both CFO before, but also HR directors. I've did that for 3 years. We have a big advantage in Germany still that is under-leveraged because we have workers' representation on our supervisory board. I can tell you from my work, actually in terms of intelligent about what goes on in the company, and because we have a European Workers' Council, I get a lot of information that I don't get out of the normal channel. Assuming 2 things, you have very qualified people, which we have, and that really care for the benefit of the company and not just their own positions. And we in Allianz have been very fortunate to have that makeup. I would actually go so far to say without their support, I would have not made it.
At this meeting here in Davos and also in the management world at large, there is a lot of talk about shifting from shareholder back to stakeholder value these days. There was even 200 leading American CEOs last summer who signed a declaration saying exactly that.
Welcome to soziale Marktwirtschaft.
Yeah.
Well,
my question is, does this affect you at all? Are you changing too in that regard?
It would be very sad if we were to say yes. I think another advantage that we have in Germany and big parts of Europe, that we have had that concept for a long, long time. The issue that we have to wrestle with is that what do CEOs say and what do investors, and we are big investors, actually do when they make capital allocation decisions. And a lot of the incentives we still have in capital markets are too short-term driven. We just need to say it as you asked for the truth. So there's a lot of people that say in public, that write letters and says, here's a letter for you this year. But when it gets to decision making on a quick buck on an M&A transaction that is hostile, they tender the shares. They do securities lending to support hedge funds. So I think the press can play a big role between sort of what they are saying and what they do every day. If the large asset managers of this world supply all the shares through securities lending for hedge funds and short sellers, then you should ask yourself, didn't you just last year write that you are for sustainable capitalism? How do these 2 things work together? So there's a lot of storytelling at the moment, particularly in the Anglo-Saxon world. We would like to see a little more implementation action.
How do you view that?
I guess there's, first of all, I think it's a positive sign that in the Anglo-Saxon world there's a realization that the myopic focus on shareholder value only is not necessarily conducive to real long-term value creation. even though the Anglo-American system has been superior, for let's say many years or decades. Given where our companies are, we are running co-determined organizations. You mentioned I share your perspective 100%. Our companies, certainly the, let's say, traditional bigger companies in Germany, have, I think, mostly a much bigger footprint in terms of their should I call it, let's say, their role in the community. Certainly our company, if I look at BEAR and what BEAR stands for, has always wanted to be, is deeply ingrained in our culture. We want to be a good corporate citizen. Yeah, we like to do good things. We like to care for our people. The company was founded and then later on moved to a place where there was no infrastructure. It was totally clear that the company was going to build it. And that was 140 years ago. That infrastructure, whether it's sports clubs, whether it is housing, whether it's culture, many other things are still being supported by the company, actually now for a much broader community that goes way beyond the company. And I think that that is a key element going forward, as public trust is actually going down, or has gone down significantly for organizations like ours, that we have a chance to be part of a community, and then also with that also rebuild some of the trust that has been lost over the years.
You both make it sound like Germany was never affected by the shareholder virus, but if I remember Daimler Chrysler, or if I remember Deutsche Bank under Ackermann, it may at least have sort of made its way through to the edges of Germany. We also.
But these are very good examples. If we have time, we can go through that, not without the companies. The issue is really serious, as you mentioned, because the vast majority of our capital are controlled by foreigners, because we have zero incentives for German savers to invest, whether it's directly or indirectly, in stock companies. We're actually driving them into bank deposits with negative returns. Yep. So it's our own fault that we have Americans running Germany.
I think there we can agree very quickly. There's also a lot of talk about to get this issue of the table. We also hear a lot about greater purpose these days. When it comes to companies. In one word or one sentence at the most, what's the purpose of your company?
Science for a better life.
We call it "We secure your future."
All right.
Was that a personal comment? No.
We already do, because we run the Deutsche Presseversorgungswerk.
Oh, okay.
That's a good one. If I had to rely on the Presseversorgungswerk, ladies and gentlemen, I'd be a very poor person.
Without us, you would be much poorer.
To interfere in society is something that many people expect of people like you. And there are people in Germany, CEOs in Germany, especially Joe Kaeser of Siemens, who do this, who speak broadly on political issues, who ask for inclusive capitalism. Is there, to you, is Joe Kaeser a model? Is that something you strive after, or is it an anti-model, something you really don't want to do? Oliver, if you want to start.
I think every person has to figure out what their profile is. I don't want to comment on what Joe does. He has a very exciting and very challenging job. We have made for us, for our institution, myself, made the decision that we have an opinion on matters that we have competence in. So think about retirement, thinking about social security, thinking about healthcare, but that we venture our opinion in a direct conversation with the political parties, by the way, across the spectrum. But I'm not elected by the people, so have no power, no right to speak on behalf of the electorate. I can only, as an expert, voice an opinion, and I think, criticizing our government doesn't help at all. Actually, it polarizes. But what we do, we come with facts, we come with experience, and then say, if you'd ask us, this is what we recommend. So, and we stick to the subject matters that we really think we know something about. Not me having an opinion on immigration, and yes, I do as a civil servant, but again, I'm not elected for that.
But you do, Werner, if I may continue this line of questioning for a moment, you do have an opinion and you do have an expert opinion, for example, on climate issues and
Yes,
environmental issues. But at the same time, you don't really speak out on them in a very audible fashion. It's not that all, for example, 30 German DAX CEOs, leading CEOs, bring together an initiative to finally sort of get the the climate train on track. So I'm wondering, aren't you underselling both your expertise and your influence?
First of all, I agree on everything that Oliver said. Yeah, that's also my opinion. If at all, it's policy, but not politics, that we comment on to the extent that we are affected by it. And all of us have our own convictions and perspectives, but nothing that anybody will really benefit from, I believe, if we were to share it also in our roles, because it always comes back and it's going to be linked to the roles we have, if we are too vocal about it. But everybody has to decide on his own what it is that he wants to portray to the world. Secondly, broader initiatives. There's a saying in Germany that holds true from time to time. Und wenn ich nicht mehr weiter weiß, dann gründe ich einen Arbeitskreis. I don't know what.
You have to try and translate, I'm afraid.
English, I don't know what the English translation is. So if I don't know how to figure out myself, I kind of create a task force. That is not necessarily the best way to go. I think what's much more important, and with that, I think the stimulus we have gotten with that very much elevated discussion on saving the world by doing more for the climate and also for the sustainability, I think that has certainly unlocked in our company a realization that we have not stretched ourselves far enough, that we could do much more if we really try harder. And that is what has led into the formulation of our sustainability strategy that cuts across a number of different areas that we believe are very important for us to become a systemic part of the solution that we need to actually be in order to hit the SDG objectives by 2030, and then put our money, our efforts, and our energy where our mouth is. That has to be, I think, a very, very integrated system that starts with the formulation of what it is that we are going to do. Secondly, putting in the metrics that we are going to measure with. Third, formulating milestones. And fourth, not to forget, to make sure that our organization is aligned. That they're in it with their hearts, which is actually not that difficult because a lot of people sign up for the right thing very, very quickly. But B, that they stay on it. And for that to stay on, it means that the incentives have to be aligned, in order to make sure that people continue to do the right thing.
Can I press you a little bit more on this? Because I'm not 100% convinced yet
I'll work on you.
About sort of the use of your influence and power. Because on one hand, you're very ready to take a lot of risk, to take on a lot of resistance. I mean, Werner, you, for example, you bought probably one of the most risky companies on the planet, and you're driving your digital change and simplification process very hard. But when it comes to these sort of overarching questions, namely climate change as the most pressing one, then this courage seems to not take hold anymore. Then it's all way more careful and confined to sort of what you can do at the moment. Isn't sort of?
Can I disagree? Actually, here in Davos. Okay, so my last day.
I think
Allianz
you
with
have
the company with 17 other companies, CalPERS. We have the world represented, the Japanese. We founded the Net Zero Asset Alliance, which means the asset owners, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurers, not asset managers that have a mandate, have committed already in September $2.4 trillion to go to net zero by 50. Nothing happened before. We're the only group that has a target. A real target that is hardwired, will be hardwired in our centers, and will be hardwired. We were the first company to exit coal investments, and the exit, by the way, people standing in front of my house in Cologne are not being happy about it. So it's not that we're not doing it. It's going to be, by the end of this week, at least 4 trillion, which is, by the way, the size of the German economy. In 6 months, we've gotten investors to commit to exit the portfolios. And the companies that we invested will feel it very soon. So in the area, because we are one of the largest institutional investors in Europe, so we can make change happen, and we do that. And we are also commenting to our government of what makes sense and makes no sense. So we get all this, going after car drivers and after the car industries, where we have millions of lorries running across Europe, making much more of a mess of our environment that nobody talks about. When the ship goes down the Elbe, it makes 100,000 cars equivalent in terms of dirt into the air. Nobody talks about that. Nobody addresses that. We let ourselves be known. And we need to get to some science into that. So on climate change, I can agree with many other things. By the way, I agree also that we can do a better job in having the 30 largest companies to have one voice. We used to be much better. By the way, when we did that, we were very heavily criticized for being the Deutschland AG.
Sure, you have to live with criticism. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. But what I'm trying to say on climate change, I think German companies are actually at the forefront. Now we have many other areas. Digitalization, you just mentioned. Just think about the following number: 50% of households in France have a cable connection. Now, Glasfaser in German. In Germany, it's 5. It's totally embarrassing. We've known it for 10 years. It's written up in the press and nothing happens. How many times do I need to repeat that? And we can do it as 30 ducks. We can sing a choir. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything. The only thing that happens is that we become the objective of other people's ear. I think people need, when the next time they go and elect, say, what is the government doing practically, and then vote. That's what they are doing, and we are trying to make practical proposals where we have influence. And climate change, I'm doing it every day.
But there we go again. Because of, you talked about climate change, and then you go to digitization, and off topic you are, because there are all these other things that also have to be taken care of. But is climate change really just one of the topics?
So maybe we go back onto the topic, and the first question I would have is, what is missing that the alliance of the 30 DAX companies would do some good on? Yeah, the way maybe with, let's say, some limitations we have been looking at it is that we have something that I think people can relate to and sign up for, because it's been very, very broadly communicated, and there's a very, very solid following and support. These are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them. What we did when we looked at what it is that we can do in terms of contributing from our end towards a more sustainable world is that we looked at those goals rather than thinking up something new that would actually contribute to the confusion, whether we do it as a company or whether we do it in the alliance of the 30 biggest companies in Germany. But we went back a more simplistic way and said, well, these are actually very, very good objectives. They are backed by a very recognized and renowned organization, so nobody is going to come and tell us that this is self-serving the way we kind of formulated them, then how we set the targets and so on. And we are now looking at the right measures that also have to be transferable, they have to be trackable, they have to be auditable, so that we can transparently measure progress towards the things that we have signed up for. And we have signed up for, as a company, to be climate neutral within the frame of the goals that were set by 2030. We have also signed up for a number of other objectives that we are going to get accomplished by 2030 that will contribute to reaching a number, actually 3 or 4, of the sustainability goals. We have also signed up for creating a much bigger impact than what we can do on our own, which is kind of, let's say, the basics, that we become climate neutral. We need to do much more in order to create a bigger impact on climate neutrality, in particular in agriculture, when it comes to driving down the carbon footprint of agriculture. And we have signed up for a 30% reduction in that space as well, with the products and the solutions that we can contribute over the next 10 years. I think it wouldn't get any better if we were to have that discussion within the group of the DAX CEOs. I'm sorry for that, but I can't see the point.
I don't want to bring in Greta, and I don't want to bring in Luisa, but I have a 14-year-old environmentally conscious daughter who's way smarter than I am, and she would say to what you both say, maybe you are further advanced than the rest of some of the world, Americans at least. But are you serious? 2050? You have to do this way earlier, because if you only stop this investing by 2050, we're not going to be climate neutral on this planet in the same year.
That's the end of the journey, not the beginning. So a lot of things will happen for it. But to your daughter, I also have 2 kids, 19 and 20. I get the same speech. And they are correct. And they are correct, because the world is run by people over 50, mostly men, that basically subconsciously think we're going to be long dead when the effects of all this nonsense will come in. And they are correct. So we need to be much, much faster. But at the same time, this is not about religion. It is about facts and what we can do tomorrow. And by the way, there's a lot more that we can do a lot faster. So for example, we were together as the asset owners with the oil and gas industry today. We've told them 15%, I'm done in a second, 15% of the CO2 emissions are created as we extract oil and gas out of this earth. It's mostly methane, by the way. And they can be addressed tomorrow. We don't need to wait 10 years. It can be done tomorrow, and it has to happen tomorrow.
Last question to the both of you. 1 sentence as an answer, please. Werner, if I may start with you. You both don't want to get involved into politics, but if there is one governmental measure that you would hit the streets for, what would it be?
I would actually happily contribute a lot of money to campaign, that straightens some of our politicians out, to talk about the truth, and actually drive more science and fact-based decisions rather than overly politicized decisions. I think that would make a big difference in the political arena.
Oliver?
I think I'm very much aware that, sorry, I'm supposed to not say much anymore.
No, just 1 sentence.
One sentence is, I go to the streets for what my kids also go to the streets for, making sure that we leave the planet in a better place than I inherited from my predecessor.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation turned out a little more serious than I had anticipated. And I thank both of you to stick with it, stick with me, and enduring me calling you by your first names. Thank you very much, everybody. This is over because we have to leave the house. Thank you very much to the organizers, and thank you very much for all of you to not only come but to stay. Thank you very much.